Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is going to be another Raid Shadow Legends video, and we're continuing this Faction Wars series, talking about the different champions for the different factions that are associated with them, and how to build your team when trying to take down Faction Wars, and yeah, that kind of thing, right? So we're going to be talking about Ogryn tribes today. Now, this is one of those factions where you probably don't have a lot of champions because there's not a lot that are available for you, but they do have a ton of epics, and this actually isn't as difficult a faction as some of the other ones because you do have some pretty solid options for champions that you can use for this, which is nice because, I mean, I'm talking outside of the legendaries, right? Everybody's got a couple legendaries here and there, but the amount of legendaries you have, which faction they're in, which ones are leveled up or booked, that really can determine a lot of which factions are going to be easiest or hardest for you. I didn't have any problems with skinwalkers when I was doing it because I had 2 coronars sitting and ready to go for it. When it came to Ogryn, I was lacking a lot, so it was a lot harder for me to get through it. And so depending on where your account is, it's going to make a huge difference on how easy or difficult any individual one of these factions can be. But the whole idea of this is to show you how you can go through it regardless of the champions you have, regardless of the level of gear you have. Obviously, as a big caveat, I have to say this up front, my gear is going to be good because I've been playing this game for 3 years, and there's not a whole lot I can do about that. I've tossed out all the stuff that isn't that good. So it's just kind of where I'm at. But I try to keep things fairly reasonable, not always as reasonable as you might like to see for your account in relation, but the idea, the concepts, the approaches that I'm taking are going to be across the board, right? No matter what level you're at, you should be able to take at least the ideas and the concepts that I'm using and approach them with your team, because that's how I got through it all. I didn't always have an OP account. In fact, I was free to play for my first year playing this game. So it's very practical and easy, not easy, but it's definitely something that everybody should be able to attain to get through Faction Wars. Once you get enough champions to beat it all, and once you get them leveled up, at that point, it's about gearing them the way that they need to be geared for that particular difficulty that you're facing. That's really what it comes down to. So that's what we're going to be looking at. We'll look at the bosses, go over their skills so you have an idea of how to approach them. We'll go over the champions that are available that you can pick and choose from, and maybe some approaches that you might want to take. And then we'll tackle stage 21 with the team I put together that is absent any legendaries, even bringing in another rare champion, so you can see how you can go about this regardless of the champions you have. I really appreciate you coming by to watch this video, and if you enjoy it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below, the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And of course, if you enjoyed today's music, we have that Soundstripe link down below in the pinned comment description of this video, along with my code DeadwoodJedi to save yourself 15%. And of course, if you're looking for account work, you can find that on my website, deadwoodjedi.com. So let's start off by looking at the bosses, and we're going to start with stage 7 here, and this is going to be the Protector. Again, Ogryn tribes, right? So the Protector has AoE attack on the A1 with a fear debuff. It's always annoying, especially when it's an AoE attack. That's very problematic, but we'll be able to deal with that, I think. The A2 is a revive all dead allies with full HP and places a sleep debuff on this champion for 1 turn. This is a really unique ability here, reviving the 2 adds that he has on the side here. This is going to tell us how we want to approach this boss. And then the A3 attacks one enemy with 2 random allies, places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn if all allies are dead. Allies joining the attack use their default skills. So, what does this mean? This is really interesting, right? Obviously, a block damage buff is annoying, and an ally attack ability can be really problematic. Not to mention, there's a revive for his allies. So one of the things this is telling me is that we do not want to focus on the side minions, right? I'm just going to let them live. Let them do their thing. What I want to focus on is I want to focus on the boss. If he doesn't revive, then that A2 skill just doesn't get used. That's great for us. Or it gets used and nothing happens, right? He just goes to sleep. That's probably not what's going to happen. He's just not going to use it. So if we leave the side guys alive, that makes life a lot easier for us. We just know what we have to do. We need to survive the hits that are coming at us. We need to deal with that fear that's going to be landing on us. And we need to burn down the boss as quick as we can. Now, as always, this is stage 7. It's not usually that hard if you have leveled up champions. But obviously, when you first face this, you probably don't. So how do you deal with this? You definitely want to bring in someone that can give you decreased defense and or weaken to put on the boss, right? That's going to make hitting him a lot easier. In addition to that, you're going to want to bring in at least 1 or 2 carry champions to make sure everybody survives, because what's happening, you're getting feared and you're getting attacked by not only the boss, but his 2 side minions as well. So you really got to do a pretty good job of surviving that. And that's going to be hard. It's not an easy thing, especially at low levels. So ally protection is going to be your best buddy here. Block debuffs is going to be really nice. Unkillable ability is always a really good option too, but on top of that, a lot of healing. That's really going to be helpful. And on top of that, you want to build your champions with enough defense and HP to survive. And if you can't, then you're looking at bringing in a reviver to help you get through this. Unfortunately, Ogryn's not great for that, but we'll get to that in a little bit later. Now, the stage 14 boss is the Disruptor, and this guy is always a little bit annoying because he's got 2 provoke attacks on the A1. Then he's got a True Fear as an AoE on that A2. Those are 2 pretty annoying things. True Fear is awful, and for a 2-turn duration, that is terrible. And the provoke can be problematic because it can shut down some of your champions. So what does this mean for us, right? Again, it's pretty simple. We want to make sure that we are blocking the debuffs if we can. If we can. If we can't, that's okay. We just want to make sure we have somebody that can cleanse, right? And resist those, hopefully. So I'm looking to bring in at least 1 carry champion with a cleanse that can have some resistance. Even if it's not my carry, it's somebody that's giving me healing or ally protection. If I have somebody that can give me block debuffs or a cleanse ability, I want to make sure I have enough resistance on them so they're not getting provoked and they're not getting true feared. And so they can help make the rest of your team work through this. Now, obviously, if you're strong enough, you don't really have to worry about any debuffs, right? If you're strong enough and tanky enough where the damage isn't going to kill you and you can hit the guy hard enough and fast enough, it's not a worry, right? At my level, that's probably not the issue. It's one of the reasons why I don't show stage 14 or stage 7. But if you're not there, which I'm sure a lot of you aren't, if you're interested in this, what you really want to do is, again, bring in somebody that can remove those debuffs from the rest of your allies. That's the ideal scenario. And if you can't, you definitely want to make sure that you're bringing in some champions that can help you survive the damage that you're taking in the meantime. Now, there's no healing going on in here, so one of the things you can do, there's no revive either, right? It's not the protector, so you can always bring in poisons to do the damage for you. You can bring in HP burn to do the damage for you. You don't have to rely on raw damage, right? There's more than a couple of approaches to this. So as far as the damage goes, you have a lot more options. You don't need decreased defense or weaken. It just helps a lot. But one of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing is definitely making sure that you're surviving. So strong carry champions are going to be vital for this, as well as hopefully some cleansing abilities or at least blocking some debuffs. One or the other is going to be really helpful. And for those champions especially, having enough speed so they can cycle through their skills is going to be really vital. And then we get to the final boss, stage 21, the Incinerator. This is the one I'm actually going to be doing a run of. Now, this one, the A1, it's attack, places poisons. Cool. The problem is also decreases the target's turn meter by 35%. That can always be problematic. The A2 attacks all enemies, places a true fear debuff for 1 turn, and places a poison debuff for 3 turns. Also decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 50%. This one's really bad, right? When you're decreasing turn meter, when you're placing true fear, that is such a problem. Because not only if you take a turn, are you maybe not taking a turn, but you may not be taking a turn at all because your turn meter is not fast enough. So that can be a problem when the boss can take 2 turns in a row. That's when you start having people die. And also has a passive ability where HP burn for 1 turn on the attacker when he's hit. So there's some things that we got to deal with here. Obviously, block debuffs is huge. Obviously, cleansing is huge. And with somebody that can resist, especially that true fear, would be really, really helpful. But if you don't have that, you're really trying to find a way to heal up as quick and as heavy as possible, as well as survive those double hits, because inevitably you're probably going to. Now, for me, my teams, my champions, I can usually build fast enough where I can, even if my turn meter is decreased by 50%, enough of my champions can take a turn where I'm still interrupting the boss and probably not going to die. But for many of you, that's not going to be the case. So, you know, survivability becomes paramount here. Being able to withstand 2 hits in a row and then still heal up becomes really, really important. The poisons don't concern me as much, right? The poison here, poison there, that's not going to be a deal breaker. What is going to be a deal breaker is that true fear coming down, as well as that turn meter reduction. More importantly, that turn meter reduction can be really problematic. So bringing in speed champions, making sure your important champions, your carry champions are fast is really, really helpful. Again, you don't necessarily need to bring in decreased defense and weaken. You don't necessarily need to burn down the boss super fast. You can do it slowly with things like poisons or HP burn and just have it be a damage over time scenario. It can be a really good approach to something like this as well. Okay, let's talk about the Ogryn Tribe champions. So we have an understanding of what we can use. Now, one of the best things about the Ogryn, they actually have a lot of really good epics and rare champions. Not a ton of rare champions that are good, but some rare champions that are good and useful for you. So there's a lot of ways to actually approach this, which is really kind of nice. Like I said, when they're talking about that stage 21 boss, especially, we're talking about a lot of turn meter stuff, right? That's really problematic. Not to mention that true fear, which is across all stages. Thankfully, there's more than a fair amount of healing in this faction, whether we're talking about Grush the Mangler or Orgrim, Grunch, Killjoy, all of those have some solid healing abilities. Not to mention we still have Ugo in here and Claude, who can place a very nice shield on your champion. So already we're talking 5 champions that bring some serious healing for your team. Those are significant and really, really helpful as far as trying to stay alive. On top of that, we have Maneater here who places block debuffs. We have Orgrim who can cleanse. And Ugo can reduce the duration of debuffs as well. So all of those are really good options as far as champions to bring in, because they're going to be doing a lot of stuff for you as far as carrying. They're going to be healing you. They're going to be cleansing for you. They're going to be blocking debuffs, making you unkillable in Maneater's case. Definitely champions that I would be looking at. Another one I would be looking at is Skull Crusher, who does an ally protection ability. That's always really helpful. Those other champions are kind of the ones I would be looking at as far as like healing goes. And then of course, we still have to deal with controlling the enemy. That's always important, especially through the waves, right? We got to get through the waves, and the waves in this faction are tougher, right? So we do need some kind of control. My actual favorite choice in this is the champion I built just for this, because I was like, oh, this might be an interesting one to bring in. Is Shatter Bones. Shatter Bones is insanely good. Insanely good. If you don't know this, if you're sleeping on him, don't anymore. He's great. Got an increased attack buff, no big deal. But his A2 attacks all enemies 3 times and a 50% chance to decrease turn meter by 30%. Basically, he can like completely reduce the enemy's turn meter. It's wildly good. Wildly good. And he can hit pretty hard with it too. His A3, decreased speed debuff plus a turn meter boost for your team. This guy is incredibly good. So because he's controlling the enemy with speed, right? If they don't take a turn, that's the same thing as like, freezing them up, right? They're not taking a turn. So that's another great way to do control. So you want to build him fast so he can cycle through those skills. They're not on quick cooldowns, right? So you build him fast so he cycles through those skills, make sure he has enough accuracy to land them, but he by himself can pretty much control the enemy and give you enough time to deal the damage you need. Obviously, you need to be able to, deal damage otherwise as well. And there are some champions that can do that for you very nicely on top of that. There's not a whole lot else control-wise here that I would look at. Prundar is one option, but he takes like 20 books, so I generally would ignore him. But he does have a Provoke here as an AoE with an increased defense buff on himself. It's actually pretty solid. And he's not a bad champion. This book's up to a 75% chance on a 3-turn cooldown. If you want to, great option actually for Faction Wars. I just would never put in 20 books on him. But he also has a strength buff, continuous heal. Again, more healing in this faction, pretty wild. Decreased speed on his A1 and a stun ability if he's counterattacking, right? Also, he gets less damage from Provoke, and he has a chance to counterattack whenever a Provoke champion attacks him or an ally. So there are a lot of positives with this kid. He's actually really good for Faction Wars. I just don't like him, so I don't recommend him. And then we have a bunch of rare champions, a few rare champions that are worth mentioning, I would say. We've got Michaelis here, which I think is absolutely amazing for a rare, and I actually bring him into this team. Basically, it's just a ton of healing. He's a heal bot and ally protection bot, right? He's got heal on his A1. He's got a shield and ally protection on his A2, plus a heal. And his passive ability, he decreases the damage allies receive, and he takes it instead. Really good champion as a rare champion, I would say. Very good. Of course, the only reviver in this faction really is Gear Grinder, and this is probably the biggest drawback for this faction, because if you're not tough enough to survive, it's going to be really hard. And so Gear Grinder is a really good option as a rare. Now, it's single target revive, which is less than great, but he does have an AoE heal on top of that, and a heal on his A1 too. So there are some positives with using him. Somebody I would definitely consider if you're struggling on this. And the other one I want to point out here is Bellower. And Bellower, as we all know, is a famous 6-second campaign farmer, right? I use him for that. I have for a long, long time. Phenomenal champion. But he also brings decreased defense, decreased attack, decreased speed, and block active skills, and they're all AoE skills. So one amazingly good approach, especially when you're dealing with the waves, is put Bellower in a stun set or a provoke set even. I mean, you got to keep him alive, so that makes it a little harder. But a stun set is great on him. And what that can do is it can help really lock down the waves. You don't have to bring him as a damage dealer. You can bring him fully as a control champion and can be really, really good at that. Bring in decreased defense and decreased attack, even if they're the small ones, can make a world of difference. Now, of course, if we're talking with the epics, we do have some amazing options for debuffers and damage dealers. Ugo is going to be great as a decreased defense champion. Phenomenal for that. Block buffs as well. So he's a really good option. But another one I really want to point out here, and I think he might be the best epic in this faction as far as faction wars go, is Siege Hulk. Siege Hulk is an incredibly strong damage dealer. I'd never used him till I built him for this. He's awesome. Awesome. AoE decreased defense on top of that. It gives himself crit rate, crit damage buff. He can place decreased speed on a single target, decreased defense on target, reduces turn meter. Like, he's really good. And on top of that, he has incredible damage dealer. So definitely would recommend using him for this. I think you could probably use him for other areas of this game as well. So there's lots of ways to approach these things, I think. If you're worried about speed, Claude is phenomenal. A great speed champion will give you more accuracy with an increased accuracy buff and has a pretty sizable shield as well, which can help keep your team alive. So those are some really great champions. Of course, the MVP would be Orgrim. He has a cleanse. He has some continuous heals. Does poisons. Really, really good, and an approach I would take with this. So the team I've built today is going to be a little bit more end game than some of the other factions I've shown before. I definitely built everybody up pretty high because, I mean, I could. And I like these champions, and so they were worth building pretty heavily. So just kind of be aware of that. They're going to be a little bit more end game than maybe you might expect. Okay, so as we go into the run here, I'm just going to let this thing run on auto till we get to the boss. There's not really a whole lot I have to pay attention to, as again, the waves in this faction aren't especially hard. Now, the champions I'm bringing in, I got Michaelis in there. Great healing, has an ally protection, even if it's a small one, also has some passive abilities. I think I have Bulwark on him. So he's really, when the ally protection, he's protecting 10% of the damage, and then on top of that, the ally protection does another 25. He's a pretty good champion to keep everybody alive, which is what I need. You know, I've got Grunch Killjoy in there, who's actually really, really good for this, and I highly recommend building him for this, for the faction wars if you need to build a specific champion. And part of the reason why he has an AoE cleanse, he has the healing. He also brings some bombs, which is a nice little additional damage where I don't have to do a lot to build it up, but whatever I do is going to just add to things. I don't have to build him with huge crit rate or crit damage or anything. He can still be effective, which I think is great. On top of that, I have Orgrim, who's always amazing, right? Has a single target cleanse, a lot of healing, continuous heals, and poisons. So we get a lot of passive damage out of this. And then Siege Hulk obviously has really strong single target damage and an AoE decreased defense, which is massive. And I have Shatter Bones in there doing a lot of control. And you can see right here. Now, my goal here is to take out the side guys, right? That's a Reliquary Tender and a Warcaster. I don't want block damage. I don't want any cleansing, and that's what's going to happen there, so I need to get rid of it. And you see Shatter Bones reducing that turn meter so effective to let us take care of those side minions really, really quickly. Now, I don't even have to finish them up because we have poisons in there, right? I know that Reliquary Tender, when their turn's going to come around, she's going to die at a certain point, so I don't have to worry about it. I just want to make sure we don't get those block buffs or anything else out, or that, you know, block damage out on the boss. And those bombs are going to do a little bit of damage, not a ton, but enough to progress it. You can see those poisons landing. We do have some resistance in this team, not crazy amounts, but enough. And now at this point, we're just going to burn him down. We get the decreased defense out there. We've got the, you know, we're dealing with our burns, but we have so much continuous healing, it doesn't even matter, right? I'm not even bringing in OP champions like a Man-Eater, who, by the way, would be OP for this because he can steal turn meter too. Really, really good. But look, there's those true fears. But my two carries, Orgrim and Killjoy, they don't have it. They have resistance on their builds, so they're able to resist that true fear and allows everybody to stay alive. That's the big thing, right? We're giving enough healing to make sure everybody can survive this fight, and that's really all I'm looking to do here. And look, it's a pretty quick run, right? All those poisons add up, adding in the decreased defense and damage from Siege Hulk, easy breezy. 2.5 minutes, not even a very long fight for us. And so we were able to get through it pretty fast and very effectively, I'd say. Okay, let's take a minute to look at the champions, and we'll start here with Orgrim. Now, this faction, the way I built them, this is a great example of ways to utilize sets to make your team stronger when it comes to faction wars. I have Orgrim in a shield set. Do I need Orgrim in a shield set? No, but what does it do? It actually allows the rest of my team to help stay alive. Orgrim's tanky. I got him plenty of HP, defense, speed, everything I need. But the one thing that's going to help everybody else is having those extra, that shield to help protect them for the first couple of rounds of every wave, not to mention the first couple of rounds against the boss when we're taking the ads down. So that's one really good approach that you can take to help bolster your team survivability, right? As far as his stats go, of course, we've got 215 speed. The faster he goes, the more healing we get on our team. And in Orgrim's case, the more poisons we put on the boss, right? 70,000 HP, 2,800 defense, enough to survive and stay alive. Probably well over what I actually need. But the more, the better. And frankly, this is slow for for me, I would never run my Orgrim like this for any other piece of content in this game. It's too slow, not enough accuracy, not enough resistance. But for Faction Wars, this is way over what I actually need, right? This is way overkill for Faction Wars. I could probably get away with 50,000 HP and everything else would be just fine. You can see, I only have 270 resist, and we didn't get true feared at all during that fight. Really effective, I'd say. So there's lots of ways to build this. It's not crazy difficult to get your champions to survive in these kinds of fights. Now, as far as masteries go, all the way down the support tree, I'm taking the accuracy bonus there, right? Eagle Eye. Don't need to build him with, what do you call it? War Master on him necessarily. He's dealing the poisons. That's going to do the job for us. I've got him down the defensive tree to help survive, add a little resistance, and get a little bit more turn meter gain. That's kind of the whole idea with his kit here. And then we have Grunch Killjoy. I was never built this champion. Didn't think I'd use him, but after looking at his kit, I was like, oh, this is absolutely perfect for this because I knew I'd need cleanse, and Grunch brings that for me, and he's super, super effective at that. I was really shocked. But one of the things I did know is on a 4-turn cooldown, so I needed him to cycle his skills fast. So one of the things I did was I built him fast, and I got him at 230 speed. This is kind of where I aim to get most of my champions at this point in my raid career, is I try to get them as fast as possible. Now, do you need 230 speed? No, obviously not. But the faster you make them, the more effective he's going to be because the more often he's going to cycle through his skills. And that's really what we want. Whether that's bombs that we want to place out there or if it's just the cleanse. In fact, I almost didn't build him with any accuracy at all until I realized I could. But you don't need to, right? His main job is just to cleanse your team. That's really all I need him there for, to cleanse and add some more healing. But yeah, 50,000 HP, 2,000 defense. He didn't die at all during that fight. You guys saw it. He wasn't really getting very low whatsoever. So there's definitely some really strong approaches as far as trying to build him without having to go crazy with it. Now, I have him in a couple mixed sets here, but I could easily see him being used with, some more specific sets. I could put a provoke set on him. I could put a stun set on him. It doesn't hurt. Even if it's single target, it doesn't hurt. Not necessarily, super useful if they're not doing AoE attacks, but it can't hurt. As far as masteries go, I have them pretty much the same as Orgrim, going down the support tree and the defensive tree to add more resistance, more defense, more turn meter, and more accuracy, of course. And then we come to Shatter Bones, who is kind of like the secret MVP of this run. That turn control turn meter control is insanely good and insanely valuable. You don't need any of these champions, right? There are substitutes for any of them, but boy, was Shatter Bones really effective here. Now, the way I have him built, again, I want him fast, so 218 speed, because the more often he goes, the less often the enemy goes, because he's reducing their turn meter. Really effective when I can do that. I built him with attack, I built him with some crit rate and some crit damage. I did want him to do as much damage as I could, because he hits pretty decently hard. Not a crazy damage dealer, don't get me wrong, but that A2, especially as a triple hit, can be really, really effective as far as dealing damage goes. So that's how I built him. You can see, has not a lot of defense, not a lot of HP, so his survivability is really reliant upon the rest of his team to heal him, and on him taking enough turns where he can heal up fully after every one. Mastery-wise, we got him going down the support tree. Again, more turn meter. Also, I wanted a little bit more chance to land that decreased speed debuff, and down to War Master as well. Ooh, and then we get the beast of the beast. Look, you can't even see anything past him. We've got Siege Hulk here. He's such a good damage dealer. I was really shocked. I'd heard it, but I hadn't seen it for myself, and it was really impressive. I obviously have him built with a lot of attack, as well as a lot of crit damage. I built him to deal damage because I know he can, and I was rewarded. I got more than enough accuracy as well to land that decreased defense. That's really what I brought him in for, the AoE decreased defense. even if he doesn't hit hard, even if you don't have these attack or crit damage numbers, that's okay. Getting the decreased defense out there will allow everybody on your team to deal a lot more damage, and it'll help you get through the waves a lot faster, get through the boss a lot cleaner too. Only 180 speed, so again, I would build him faster if I could, but this is fine. I just need the decreased defense to land. After that, he doesn't have to go crazy taking turns. And as far as like his masteries go, let's go to masteries. Where are those? There they are. We have the support tree as well as the offense tree. I did put him in Helm Smasher, just kind of to see. But I think, honestly, for this, I would probably prefer War Master to deal with the boss. But I could see Flawless Executioner, I could see Helm Smasher, I could see War Master. Any of those are going to be really viable, I think, in the long term. And then we get to my secret weapon. Oh man, I like this guy. Michaelis, the rare champion, another one of my carry champions for this faction, because he's going to give us that ally protection. He has a passive ability that helps protect, and I put him in Bulwark Mastery to help protect our team and absorb some of their damage. Now, I have him in a regen and an immortal set, right? And I find this to be really effective, especially with my ally protection champions, because they're taking a lot of damage. And so this is a way for them to heal up without having to rely on the healing from everybody else. Now, I don't think I need that on him, honestly. Built him tanky enough to withstand it, and we have enough passive healing from the other champions, the continuous heals, and his own skills where that shouldn't be an issue. But I had him in this stuff, so I just left him in it. As far as his stats go, even without everything rolled up, you can see we got 52,000 HP, 3,700 defense, 190 speed, so he's not crazy fast, but he's got pretty solid defense numbers, probably a little overkill there, and plenty of HP to help survive all this stuff. Now, I would love to build him with more resistance. I think that would be helpful here. Doesn't need the accuracy, but I don't think it's necessarily vital either, and so I kind of want to show that as well here. Mastery-wise, you can see support tree down to Bulwark, again, to help absorb some of the ally damage, and then support tree just to add to his healing as much as possible. It's kind of the way to go with that. And so that's Ogryn Faction Wars. I'm hopeful this was helpful for you guys. I really am. Obviously, you know, your team's going to be different than mine. Your gear's going to be different than mine. You maybe not have been playing for 3 years. If you are and you're still struggling here, I got to ask, what have you been doing? Because, you know, honestly, once you get enough champions, you will eventually be able to beat Faction Wars. Once you get enough champions and enough gears, it's really only a matter of time. And a little bit of knowing team composition. And that's a lot of what I'm trying to cover here is, you know, making sure that you're bringing in the necessary things, right? You got to have your carry champions, your healing, the people that are going to keep the rest of your team alive. In this case, we brought in a few of them. We got Michaelis. We've got Orgrim, we had Grunch Killjoy, and in this faction there are actually a fair amount of options. The one thing it lacks is revivers, and though Gear Grinder is an option, it's not a great one. And so you want to try to, you know, maximize your survivability without having to rely on that. I think would be really helpful when building this team. Now, one of the great things is that if you can get an Orgrim, or maybe even just using like an Occult Brawler, excellent option. Relying on poisons to do the damage for you is probably a really good way to go. So you don't have to rely on raw damage. And that allows you to bring in 5 tanky champions. And so you don't have to rely on a reviver, right? You can bring in an Occult Brawler, not build him for damage at all. Just build him for, you know, to land the poisons and survive and do a great job of beating down the boss just with poisons alone. I think that's a viable approach to this. And I think it would be really good. And there's plenty of champions in this faction that can help you, you know, survive while you're doing that, right? I think Shatter Bones is absolutely an MVP. If you have them, build them for, and you need to build champions for Ogryn, Shatter Bones is an excellent option. Now, to be fair, when it comes to Faction Wars, I don't recommend building champions that you're not going to use elsewhere, and there aren't a ton of champions that I would use elsewhere, right? Outside of Orgrim, I don't really use any of these champions, but all these seem to be fairly viable in other areas of the game. So if you need them, you know, I think you could use them in a pinch in other areas, and I think specifically these champions are still pretty darn good generally. So, you know, there's definitely some ways to go about doing this to make it effective for yourselves. So just, you know, keep that in mind as you're going through it. Like, yeah, this may not be, you know, don't level up people that you don't necessarily need, but if you do need to level them up, these are some really good options. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, guys, thank you for sticking around. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll have more of these coming out. So, until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.